Hey everyone, welcome back. We're going to talk about images within Figma. So we are going to use a ton of images. I mean, it's just the way it is, whether it's for like product images, whether it's just for like landing page images. I mean, there's so many reasons why we are going to use images, and I'm not going to get into that because I think you all know. Now, the ways we can add images to our file, it varies. I personally like using plugins, and I'll explain what plugins are after, but the ways to add images, the two main ways that I personally like to do it is through copy and pasting, and then there's drag and drop. Then there's the third way, which is essentially importing the image through the file browser. So I'm going to show you the easiest way to do it. An example is, say you're in another file. So I'm in this file and I see this image that I really like. I can just copy it by pressing Command C or Control C. And then going back to my other tab and then pasting it with Command V or Control V. And that image is going to show up here. Now you can also access that file on your desktop and you can drag it right into the canvas, and that's going to be totally fine as well. You can do this with everything, frames, you can do it with like groups, anything from one file to the other. You can basically do that. So as you can tell, I just pasted the whole frame in here. So I'm just going to delete these. I'm actually going to use the other way to get one of the pictures I want in here. So if I use the rectangle tool and go down to place image, you'll see the shortcut, and you'll see that you can just click this button and it's going to prompt you to select the image that you want. So I'm just going to go into my Figma images, and then I'm going to my large image.png, and I'm going to place all. You can just click on the canvas as well, and it's going to place that. So that's how you get a picture into your file, through importing it. Now you can edit your picture in so many different ways. Let's take a look over here to our design tab on the right sidebar. Now you can scale it. So if I want to adjust it, you'll notice that the image is actually it's fine. It's just kind of filling the container. This is kind of acting like a frame in a way. It's pretty interesting. And that's why I like using pictures like this in Figma. So you can, just size it like that. You can also hold Shift and size it, and it's all going to size as well. So if you want to retain that original ratio of the image that you had. You can also just adjust things like the radius. You can adjust if it's rotated here. You can even do that here by just spinning it. You see this little angled cursor I have now? Now I can just take it for a spin. So that's really easy. And the other thing that I really like about images is the settings right here within the fill. So you can choose, right now it's set to fill, and that's why it's moving like this. But if I set that to fit, it's gonna fit basically whether it's the fitting it horizontally or vertically. See, it's fitting the top and the bottom. But if I shrink it or make it more skinnier, it's going to keep the original ratio of the image, and it's going to, just fit the width. And then you have crop, so you can crop it any which way you want. The problem with crop, though, is when you go to move it in different ways, now it's, it's not going to keep the same aspect ratio for the actual image, and then you're going to skew it. So I'm just going to go back. So we have crop, and we also have tile, so if your image doesn't, span. I don't really use tile at all. Probably could be useful for patterns. I personally use fill a lot and sometimes crop depending on the image, especially with landing pages. So that's how you can adjust some of the, different types of cropping and positioning. You can also set different things the exposure, if you really want to get into some editing, the contrast, saturation. I know I'm making this look really bad, but I'm just showing you all the different things you can do with a image. Shadows, that's horrible. So I'm just gonna reverse all of that. There we go. You can also set the blend mode over here. You have multiply, darken, so if you want to do a little bit of Photoshop kind of esque stuff. You can do that as well with some of the layers. The other great thing that I really love about Figma is that, you know, you can actually come here into the fill and adjust and add. Like if I want to add, say, a gradient, I can do that. I can just add a new layer, go up here, set it to like solid, you know, set it to 100%. And then you can start playing around with like how that kind of looks. Like, whoops, I'm gonna go back. And yeah, you can make like your own gradient if you want. So here I can just make like a white gradient that slowly goes into white up here. So that's another thing you can do with some of these Figma fills over here, which is really, really interesting. And that is how you use images in Figma. Hey everyone, welcome back. We are going to talk about how to get started with text. Now, text is really easy to use. First thing I'm just going to do to make it easier for everyone to see is I'm going to press F and create a frame. I'm just going to use one of the frames over here. So we have our frame. Now we have our text tool. And now you can just press T to get that tool. And you'll be already equipped with it. So if I zoom in here, I'm going to go right in. So what I'm using, you'll notice how I can zoom in pretty easy because I'm using the Command plus over here, the shortcut. You know, you use what is best for you. That's how I like to just quickly zoom in and out. I love using the shortcuts. And the easiest way to create a text layer is just by pressing down. So I've already, you know, there is the layer. It's showing up on my left side. And if I say, hello, welcome, Melanie. Maybe this is like the intro text to an app. So I've created the text layer. One thing we're going to do is we're going to jump right into here. This is what is available for you. Now, these are the properties for a text layer. So we've learned how to create a text layer. Now we can resize text layers. But the problem is, you know, it's a little hard to resize text layers. So they don't necessarily shrink, but the content will go to the next line. If you drag it below, you know, that may get things messed up. And the easiest way to reset once you've done something like this is to either press one of these. So you can set auto width, which would mean that it's just going to go based off of the width of the content. Or you can set an auto height, but it's going to basically cut it at a fixed width. So now I've created this width, it can still build below, like you're noticing right now, but it's not like totally uncontrolled when it comes to like how we were initially resizing it. So that's how you resize. So I'm just going to keep it like this for now, right here, where it's just like totally automatic. And let's take a look at some of the text properties. So I have my font. I have the font weight. So I'm going to use like a bold on this one. Oh, maybe a little too bold. I'm going to use semi-bold. And we have our font size. So I'm going to set that up to like 48. Whoa, too huge. Let's get down to 24. Okay. We have the spacing between letters. So if I set that to like 4%, you see how the letters basically are more spread apart. So I'm going to undo that because I think they're fine right now. We can set also the line height. I like to go based off of percentages. So I like to go to say like 115% for headings, maybe 125 to 150% for body copy. I'm going to make a copy below this just so you all can see what I'm doing here. And I'm going to actually, you know, use some filler text. So I'm going to use a plugin really quickly so I can grab some of that text. And I'm going to give it like 4 sentences. So you can see now it's been filled with 4 sentences. It's really long, so I'm going to have to shrink that text. Oops. Let's do that again. Sizing to 14. And I'm going to zoom out so I can grab it and bring it in. So there's my text. Now I'm going to bring it to 150%, so the spacing between the lines is better. And set it to regular. Now we also have paragraph spacing. I've already talked about some of the resizing options here. You can make them center aligned. This is just alignment, right aligned, left aligned. You can have an example as if I've set the height fixed. You can adjust where the text aligns there. Another interesting thing is you can go even into more details by pressing that more icon. And you can set the resizing in here. Oops. You can also, make it justified for an alignment. You can have underlines, strike-throughs. You can have paragraph spacing and indents and list styles. Yes, Figma now supports list styles, which is great. You can also specify the case style. So really great for things like subheadings. So that is what is available to you when it comes to the properties for text. Now I have 2 text layers here, pretty cool. And that didn't take us long. And you'll be just zipping through all of this really quickly once you get your handle on text. Because text is one of the big types of UI elements that we're going to use a lot of. Now, I'm just going to quickly demonstrate list items. So if you do have a list item, I'm just going to go to the very front of my list item and then just dash and a space, and it's automatically going to create a list item for me. So you can create a bunch of them. I'm just copy and pasting them. And you can set what type of list item they are, whether they're a number list or a bulleted list. So Figma also allows you to adjust the fill of text as well. So you can do that all over here in this little fill panel. And that is how you use text in Figma. Hey everyone, welcome back. We're going to be talking about constraints. Now, constraints are really important if you're using regular frames. And I'll get into that right now. So let's jump right in. So I'm going to press F to get my frame. And I'm just going to pick any frame. I'm just going to pick this one over here. So now that we have our frame in place, what we're going to do is we're going to place some items in there. Now I'm just going to press R to get a rectangle. I'm going to place one rectangle here. And I'm going to place another rectangle below it. Now I have 2 rectangles. So constraints tell Figma how layers should respond when you resize the frames. So let's take a look here. If I'm going to resize my frame, you notice that the layer beneath doesn't actually move. Now, this really helps you control how designs look across different screen sizes and devices. So there's 2 types of constraints. You have horizontal constraints and vertical constraints. Constraints are located over here on the right sidebar. So these are horizontal and these are vertical constraints. You'll notice that it says left and this one says top. That means that when I move the left side, they're going to move with it. And if I move the top side, they're going to move with it as well. Now I want to set it to left and right, and I'll leave that one at top. Now let's see what happens to this rectangle when I resize the frame. You'll notice that now it shrinks and grows. So that's pretty awesome. You can even do it in this way as well. So I'm going to leave that one at left, and I'm going to do top and bottom for the vertical constraints. You'll notice that now it shrinks up and down. You can even do things such as, let's move this one just a little bit lower. For vertical constraints, you can do center. So that means it's just going to stay kind of in place, watch. So it centers itself. You can do this even for horizontal constraints as well. You can do scale. This is really great if you want something to grow. So notice how that rectangle is going to grow in height and in width as you grow the frame. Pretty cool, right? You can apply constraints to any layer within a frame. it's not possible to apply constraints to layers outside of a frame. So if we now have this layer, I'm going to just create a copy. So I'm going to do Command or Control C and click outside the frame, and I'm going to press Command V, and Control V would be for Windows, and I'll just drag that right outside the frame. So you notice how it doesn't have the constraints on the side like it did within the regular frame. That's because it's not within a frame. You can only apply constraints within a frame or layers within an auto layout frame. So layers within an auto layout frame and layers outside of a regular frame won't have constraints. Only regular frames will have constraints. Sometimes though, you do want to resize the frame with resizing the items within. And the way to do that is to ignore the constraints. And the shortcut to hold is Command for Mac and Control for Windows. So let's take a look. So if I'm going to resize this again, this is set to scale. I'm just going to leave it. So you'll notice that, okay. Now I don't want to do anything. I'm just going to hold Command. And I can do it at any point. See, I'm holding Command now, and it'll be Control for Windows users. Now the items within are not moving. Let me just move this one out of the frame there. But as soon as I start to let go of that shortcut, things start to scale again. And that is how you use constraints within Figma. Hey everyone, and welcome back. We're going to get into how to use auto layout. So auto layout is a feature that is essentially part of regular frame. So let's jump right in. I'm going to press F to get my frames list. And then I'm going to just, select the first one just for the sake of our demonstration. So I'm going to rename this, and to rename it quickly, you can press Command R or Control R. And I am just going to call this my auto layout frame. And I'm just going to shrink it just a bit. And I'm going to create another frame below it. And I'm just going to call this my regular frame so everyone can see the difference. Now, auto layout frames are really great if you want to have like responsiveness a part of it, if you want to essentially make sure that like you can build some nice lists. It's really great for even, creating like buttons that are responsive. So I'm just going to get into a quick demonstration. So I'm going to create a rectangle or a square, doesn't matter. And I'm going to place it inside both of these frames. Now, when we look at the regular frame, everything is as we learned before about frames. But now let's turn this into an auto layout frame over here. So I'm going to click that frame. And if you go over to the properties panels over on the right sidebar in the design panel, you'll notice auto layout. If you click that little plus button, now it is in an auto layout frame. I'll get into what all this means in a quick second, but this allows you to adjust padding and between items and the padding between that's horizontal and vertical. So if I were to say add another item, like let me add another rectangle, you can just copy and paste it. You notice how the whole frame grows, and if I add more, the frame keeps on growing. And you can even adjust how that frame works, the direction, if you want it to go vertical or horizontal, and there are many more details there. You can even nest auto layout frames within frames. So I'm just going to move this one down, and like here, if you press Command C and Command V or Control C, Control V, it doesn't adjust the frame. So auto layout frames are really great for responsiveness. Let's jump right in. So we have another frame that I want to create. So I'm going to just create 2 frames of 2. So 1 and 2, and then another frame. So I'm going to select these ones. I'm going to hold down Shift, and I'm going to right click. And if we go down, we can see that we can turn it into an auto layout. So we can add auto layout. That is another frame. So, and you can see it here, it is applied as well. And I'm going to do the same over here. Right click. And it's Shift A as the shortcut, as you notice over here. This allows me to nest frames within frames. This is really powerful for layouts. We'll be using this in certain demonstrations as well, but if I now say change the direction, we're not going to have 4 vertically, we're going to have those 2 frames stack on to one another. And you can see how they're nested below. So we have our 2 rectangles up top and 2 rectangles at the bottom. And you can make some pretty cool grids. And you can even nest another frame within this frame if you'd wanted to. And the easiest way to add new items, you can, copy and paste. You can also duplicate, which is Command D or Control D, which will duplicate your last action. So I'm just going to go back with the Command Z. And you could also reorder the object. So I'm just going to change the color here really quickly. If I use my arrow keys, I can order the object within a frame and even the frame within the other frame. So you can reorder things really quickly just using your arrow keys. Or you can click and drag. Oops, just be careful not to drag it outside the frame. And if I really wanted to just, if I wanted to hide them or delete them, I can do that as well. So I can hide them like that. Or I can just delete it and it's gone. And that is how you use auto layout frames in the most basic sense. Hey everyone, welcome back. I wanted to get a little bit more into the details of using auto layout within Figma. So auto layout is, like I said, a great tool for creating some responsive designs. But there's a lot of different things that we need to learn about in order to use it effectively. So I'm going to create another frame. So here's my nice frame here, and we're just going to call this our auto layout frame. Perfect. Now, I'm going to take another rectangle and just place inside my frame. Now I'm going to go to auto layout over here on the right sidebar. And now I've created an auto layout frame. I'm going to just duplicate another rectangle within this frame, so that way we have 2 rectangles to work with. Actually, let's just do 3 as well. So I press Command D. You can even use Control D. So let's jump right in. So auto layout frames are really good. I mean, you can create buttons that grow or shrink as you edit the text label. You can build lists that adapt as items are added, removed, or hidden. You can combine auto layout frames to build complete interfaces. So think like cards. You have like a card portion with like the button that's in there. You have text in another frame. Mind you, the button is probably its own auto layout frame. And then you have the image that's a frame as well. So you can build these complete interfaces just with nesting all these auto layout frames. Now let's talk about the different properties within an auto layout frame. So selecting my frame, I'm just going to go to the right here. You can select the direction. This is the direction. You can do horizontal or vertical, and direction describes the way the auto layout frame will actually flow. So I'm just choosing vertical for now. You can choose the spacing between items, which is over here. So this is 10 pixels. I can choose, say, 24. That's perfect. Now adjusting the spacing between using canvas controls or spacing fields in the right sidebar. Now you can do it this way, manually like that, or you can just go over there. Now, padding is another very important part. The padding is going to be your horizontal padding, which you see over here, and your vertical padding. And you can adjust that by either dragging it. I'm just going to select 24. You can even do that manually by using the canvas. Now, the padding is essentially the empty white space between the boundary of an auto layout frame and the frame's child objects. So think of frames as like a parent, and these are little children within them. So like I mentioned, you can set padding uniformly, which is like selecting 24 and 24 here, which will, oops, not that much, that's too big. And you can also go into the nitty-gritty details and just select bottom padding to be 12 and left padding to be 8 or something like that. It really depends on your use case here. Now, the other thing that I haven't mentioned is alignment. Now, you need to choose how to align child objects within an auto layout frame. Both the direction of the auto layout frame and the distribution will determine what alignment options you have available. So, with that being said, say I had a couple of different objects like this. And I'm going to change the direction like that. You can see this is where you can choose the alignment. If I want them to be centered, aligned to the bottom, to the middle. This is the middle bottom, bottom right. You can choose all these different types of directions. If I wanted to, say, make one wider, then you'll start seeing the differences here. So that is how alignment works. Distribution is another key part. That's hidden in this little menu, the advanced layout settings. So let's get into it. Once you set the alignment rules for your child objects in a frame, choose how those objects will then be distributed within that frame. So right now they're packed, and that means that they're packed based off of the spacing between the items. If I were to select space between, now they're going to just spread out. So let's take a look at what that looks like. So I'm just gonna make this a little smaller. Now if I extend this like that, you'll notice that the padding is just automatically spacing itself out. Now, that is because it's set to space between. That's how distribution essentially works. You notice that the frame now doesn't go back, and that's because it is not set to hug contents. Let's talk a bit now about resizing. This is resizing up here. Now, one of the most powerful functions of auto layout is its ability to control the dimensions of the objects in an auto layout frame. So there's different types of ways you can resize. You can make it fixed, hug, and fill. So let's take a look over here. This is set to fixed. That means it has a fixed width of 218 pixels. I'm going to fill the container. That means it's going to fill all the way across, and this is amazing if you want to create frames that are responsive. Look at the top layer in comparison to the two bottom layers. Those rectangles are set to fixed. But say I want my frame just to hug the width of the content within. Now it's hugging the maximum width. These are still set to fixed. Now this one is still set to fill. You can have one, say, set to fixed like this, and then these ones set to fill as well. So that is how resizing works. It's really powerful. Now you can still apply constraints to the auto layout frame itself if it's nested within a regular frame. The constraints section and resizing options will appear, allowing you to really set those options if you need to. So let's take a look here. So you'll notice if I select this, my constraints don't show up because it's in an auto layout frame. Again, my constraints are not here, but I'm going to create a new frame. If I take this and throw it inside this frame by just dragging it over, and I'm going to set a stroke so we can see where it is. I'm going to center it. Now my constraints are showing up here. You can set this to anything you'd like. So the problem is left and right isn't showing up here. That's because it's set to hugging content. So if I say set it to fixed width and leave the hugging up here, that's fine for now. Now is available. And I'm actually going to select all of these items, and you can do that quickly by pressing Shift and holding them, or Control A or Command A. And I'm going to set them all to fill container. And now we're going to see how responsive this gets. So you can still build responsive interfaces even with regular frames combined with auto layout frames. This is a really great way to show how you can build some really great interfaces. And that's how you use auto layout frames.